Number 4 is to change behavior, change the environment, which I really, and I love this quote that you have in the, which is, when a flower doesn't bloom, you fix the environment in which it grows, not the flower.
Yeah.
And I've never heard of this guy, Alexander de Hare.
No, I must admit, I was looking for. I always try and find, quotes. I think are great at sort of things. And if somebody said it better than I could say, it, right, let's just borrow what they've said. So this guy does is kind of he's a sort of thought leader around organizational effectiveness, personal development, all that sort of space. And I just love that piece. And it's basically saying, we often fixate on people, and we identify, particularly in the
try and fix people,
right? And you go, the problem is bad people, these terrible people here. We need to reprogram the people, and you kind of go, well, people are responding to the environment they're in, and we all know that intuitively that we respond to what's going on around us. And I think when you get cases of sort of wrongdoing, if I look at in the UK, we had a big thing about politicians' expenses, big scandal. Do I think every single person going into politics is evil? I mean, it's an interesting time to be having this discussion, right? Given the chaos that's going on in the UK at the moment.
But not every single one.
But I think there's an environment that promotes this sort of thing, and I think all too often it's very convenient to be able to turn around and tell a story that the reason this has happened is it's a bad person, and we have dealt with the problem by reprogramming or firing the bad person. Yeah. We don't like to accept actually it's environment, and particularly for organisations, it's tough to turn around and go, "You've created this." Right, and so I think organisation, we should start by looking and saying, what is it when something goes wrong? What is it in the organisation's architecture, and I mean both physical and sort of control and culture and everything else, that has facilitated this sort of behaviour from happening? Yeah. That's not to say that we excuse people who do terrible things, but if we start from the premise of whenever something goes wrong, someone does something silly or bad, that it's automatically 100% down to them, you miss the opportunity to kind of correct it. And actually, but that's why I like the flower analogy particularly, because if you're growing weeds rather than flowers, if you don't fix the environment, you're just going to have more and more weeds. And so if you've got people responding to the environment and you don't fix the environment, you might get rid of or reprogram that one person, but someone else is going to come along and react in the same way.
It's because the incentive structure will be the same or whatever.
Right.
I liken this to things like insider trading or doping in sport or corruption. And if the environment is there, the incentives are there, then you're going to get more of the same type of behavior. It's just other people will do it.
And it's that sort of, we all know that if there's sort of you go to a sort of area, there's lots of graffiti there. If it's acceptable to if that becomes a prevalent thing, more people will do it. And so fixing this environmental piece is critical. And we very often kind of focus on bad people. And there's a really good book by a guy called Professor Yuval Feldman, who's a behavioural lawyer, and he's written a book called The Law of Good People. And what he basically says is, look, we should stop fixating on writing rules for bad people, because if you're really bad, you're going to do stuff anyway, right? So these attempts to control you, if you really are genuinely evil or intent on doing something, it's going to be hard to control you from doing that. And what we need to do is we need to maximise the environment for the good people and focus on how do we stop good people who, for a variety of reasons, be it that they're cognitively depleted, maybe they've got a moral blind spot on something, maybe you've just given them a situation where it's tempting for them to do something. We've got to kind of focus on those people, because the really bad guys and girls are going to do this anyway. And so this idea of kind of, let's look at the environment and how it impacts the majority of our people who want to do the right thing. Now, I always find it astonishing. Organisations sort of, on the one hand, they spend loads of money hiring people, and then they behave as if every single one of their employees is untrustworthy. And it's it's not to say that everybody is 100% trustworthy, but it's to say how can we think about avoiding situations where we drag otherwise good people into situations that are bad, and that's all around environmental cues that we take.
So would you say things like we were talking about a little bit about incentives, I suppose, what other people do, what are some of the other things?
So look, you copy other people. So if for example, there's a rule in the organisation that says, that you I don't know, let's take a particularly bad organisation that says you must be here until 6 o'clock on the dot, right? And everybody slopes off at 5:30. Everybody will start doing that. So you copy the behaviour of other people, and in what you do, you take cues from just sort of your perception of the environment, and perception is really important. So I will sort of infer what a standardized behavior is. So the best example of this is when you go traveling, go to a country you've never been to before. How do you work out which restaurants to go to? How do you work out what people to tip? How do you work out, can you cross the road when the lights are red? Well, the answer is you just watch other people and you copy them. And that's what, nightclubs exploit this. So there's a reason they artificially create those lines outside, totally unnecessary, but it sends a signal, something called social proof. You go, oh, this, subconsciously, there's loads of people standing outside. Must be a good thing to go to. They have to do that because you can't see inside the nightclub by default. So they create outside. Restaurants will will seat people by the window to make it look like they're busier than they actually are. So there's lots of examples, and it makes perfect sense, right? But sometimes it doesn't. And so we have to just be conscious of these particular dynamics that are there, and we can transmit messages to people in interesting ways. So one of the things that I found was that if you've got a lot of people breaching a particular policy within an organisation, so behaviour you don't want, often the response is, let's send an email out to everybody and remind them of the policy, which is a logical response. So they're not doing it, so I'm going to remind them. But of course, actually what you're doing with that is potentially quite bad, because if you send an email to everybody saying, and I had this, I was given an email to send, and they like heads of compliance to send out emails because it comes with authority. Right, so send this email out saying the executive committee is highly concerned by the large number of violations of this policy, this is unacceptable. Right, and so the idea being, we'll remind people and then they'll behave. But of course, actually what that does is people that are following the rule will receive an email, and they'll go,
why am I following this?
Your best case scenario is they're irritated because you're patronising them on something they do. Your worst case scenario is they go, well, they wouldn't send that email out, and they sure as hell wouldn't reference the executive committee if it wasn't a widespread thing. Why am I being good here when everybody else is being bad? And of course, then to the people that have breached the rule, what you've said to them is, hey, don't worry, you're not the only one, because clearly they wouldn't be sending this email out if it wasn't a widespread issue. So you're in good company. So the message we're subliminally transmitting to everybody is there is widespread non-compliance. Now, there are ways you can, so one of the techniques though is to not make any references to the breaches and find a helpful way. So I reworded it and sent it in a more helpful manner that kind of that made it sound like we were being supportive. People actually came and said, thank you, that was a really helpful email. It wasn't, it was a patronising reminder of the rules, but it was framed in a different way. But actually you start to look at it and go, okay, well, if all these people are doing that, why are they doing it? And this is back to the environmental piece. Well, the answer is you go and have a look at the rules and say, why is it? Is there a good reason why people aren't complying with this rule? And the answer often is, it's really hard, it's not clear, the training's terrible, the rule, it's 500 pages worth of stuff you need to read, and it's silent on the big issue.